Okay, hi everyone, and thank you for watching. Hopefully this will give you a good idea of how to narrow your paper topic so that you can get a really focused final paper. So this is Phoebe, and she has so graciously agreed to help be kind of a guinea pig to share her excellent ideas for her final paper so we can talk about it and get a good idea of how she'll get started on that project. So Phoebe, tell us a little bit about the topic that you're interested in, how you came to be interested in it, and we'll go from there.
I'm doing my paper about colorism in India, and just I'm Indian, my family's Indian. So growing up, I never really understood like why there was colorism when everyone's like the same race, but just like maybe a lighter or darker skin color. But there's like a lot of kind of discrimination against like dark-skinned Indians, which I just don't know why.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I just did my paper on that.
Okay, so that's great. So the topic is this issue of colorism, which is sort of, it's similar to racism. And what's interesting is that you have, you shared some articles with me about the way that this movement that you're interested in has been influenced a little bit by Black Lives Matter. And so there's a connection there, which is interesting. So tell us, what is the activist organization, or what is the hashtag movement that you're looking at on social media that's hoping to combat the issue of colorism in India, or just globally, because there are Indian people all over the world, right?
Yes. So just the hashtag is unfair and lovely, because fair and lovely is a skin brightening cream that makes your dark skin a little brighter, like a little lighter skin. Right. So then the hashtag is just unfair and lovely, saying like everyone's starting to embrace their dark skin.
Yes.
And realizing like it's not a bad thing or anything. So like with the Black Lives Matter movement, it actually brought some awareness to about like colorism in India.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna share my screen, and we're just gonna go to my desktop, and I'm going to look at some of the documents that she sent me, but we're also gonna do this, we're trying to find a focused way to write a 4 to 6 page paper. And so what Phoebe is looking at is kind of like this idea of hashtag activism. So in this case, she's looking at this hashtag unfair and lovely, and we're going to look at the things, because there's a brand of skin lightening creams called Fair and Lovely. So this was a hashtag that was started that we're going to look at, and it's kind of like how the Me Too movement has happened, and we call it kind of a movement, right? Because it's under this idea of uniting people under an idea or a common desire for change. The question that I think we will ask as it pertains to our class is, how is this effective, right? What is it actually accomplishing? We want to think about the idea of, remember we've been thinking about slacktivism versus activism. Are they the same things? How is social media, like how was the hashtag accomplishing some kind of goal? So what I was really interested in was, the broad goal of this movement is to bring awareness. So we keep saying this word awareness, right? Of the kind of discrimination that happens because of darker skin in India, and let's be honest, around the world. So this isn't just for sort of like, this is for Indian people specifically, but I think the idea can pertain to other groups as well. But this one is specifically for Indian people. But do they have smaller goals? What do they want to see happening on sort of a smaller level? Are there laws that they want to pass? Are there any kinds of things that they want to achieve in the short term? And I found one in the articles that you sent, but I wanted to know if you have an idea of a smaller goal that they want to accomplish.
Well, the movement is still kind of new and like
Yes.
not as heard of in India. So I'm not sure if there's too much to it yet.
Okay, got it. So let's just look at what it is that this movement is all about and how it got started. So there are the first thing that Phoebe did that was great was she went and just did some basic Google searching, probably, to find some really good, credible articles that are not academic. They're popular, right? Because this is BBC News. But you have your author listed, you have a date. So this is from 2016, and it explains how this hashtag came about. And it's actually really great because it gives us an idea of where it came from, and it tells us about the skin lightening issue and how this is affecting people. Not only is it making money off of people's insecurities, but it's doing something that's sort of like continuing the problem, right? It's continuing the discrimination. And so she read through this, she's got all this, and she has some examples of social media posts that sort of give an idea. And at the very end, it says the broad goal here is we wanted to start a conversation, right? So that's one of their goals, starting a conversation, right? But there's got to be more to it than that, right? We need something more than just a conversation. I also liked, and this is why Phoebe did such a great job, is because she found even more information. So here it is from 2020. Black Lives Matter gets Indian talking about skin lightening and colorism. This is a great article too. So she did some research, right? She's digging into this before she decides what her paper topic is going to be. And what I found is so many great links to other things that might help Phoebe find a way to create a good paper. So in 2009, there is this campaign called Dark is Beautiful. And that's an older organization. And I went to their homepage and I found a lot of good information and a lot of good activism that's actually happening here. So this is their home, and it explains you have people telling their story about their sort of experience of colorism. You have people doing, here's everybody who's involved, which is really interesting. But also it explains that they do workshops. So you can look at, they're not just starting a conversation, but they're actually going into places to get that conversation started and then do more with it. So begin to actually break down these barriers. So they're going to schools, colleges, corporations, communities to try to find a way to end this thing. They have their advocacy as well. They have a lot of different things that they are doing. The last thing, or I'll show a couple more things. I also found that again, really great work that you found here, really great examples, a ton of posts that you can click on and actually see. So, and this is the official page of Unfair and Lovely, which was started by two students at the University of Austin. And so they basically post images of people who are Indian people who do not have very, very light skin, and it's got the hashtag, right, Unfair and Lovely, and so you're beginning to see more and more people. And then I do think the last thing I'll say is that they did actually accomplish a real small short-term goal. They started a petition because they wanted to change the name of the product Fair and Lovely. So Fair and Lovely is that skin lightening cream, right? And they thought that if you have the words fair and lovely, it assumes that loveliness is fairness, right? And so they did change the name. And so I think that is a really important thing for Phoebe to remember, is that the smaller goal might be little things like changing the product sort of advertisement for these creams, making them less popular in some way, because starting a conversation is a broad goal that doesn't have like, what is it actually doing, right? The more it might be changing our hearts and minds, but how is it changing the actual discrimination that's happening in the world because of colorism? So that's another thing I think that is important to think about. So after all of those things, what are some ways you might relate these things that you've found, these articles about what's actually happening in the movement, these Instagram posts that show people who have darker skin really embracing their identities? How can we relate that to something like watch a 30-minute video where they're talking about the concepts of simple stories versus complex stories, where they're talking about how do we have our major goals and what is our process? How can we relate that to maybe the concept of, do you remember drillability, where there is an organization that has lots and lots and lots of information versus an organization that has just a little bit information? What are some things you are seeing with Unfair and Lovely that might need to learn from the mistakes of invisible children, or that might need to learn from the mistakes in the Racial Clicktivism article that we read? What are you thinking about that might help you connect Unfair and Lovely to these bigger ideas? And you don't have to have a perfect answer, but I'm wondering if you have just a couple of ideas. And if you don't...
Sorry, I'm like...
Yeah, that's okay. Here's my thought. I saw that Unfair and Lovely, just like you were saying, is very new, right? When you go to their main page, how many followers do they have? They have...
It's just 9,000.
Right. It's not a lot of engagement. And they have, I don't know how long they've been around. It seems like since 2007, but they're getting something like 600 likes. And this is from 2019, right? So Unfair and Lovely is new, but it's not really getting much traction anymore, right? It doesn't seem to be very active. Whereas I wonder about Dark is Beautiful. They seem to still be quite active, right? They seem to still be doing work. They seem to have a mission. They seem to have a movement here, right? And Black Lives Matter the article about Black Lives Matter cites them as being a group that it began in 2009 and it's continued on. You also have this kind of information about this person who has started the petition to get the movement to change the name of the cream, right? And that they're actually making some progress here. So I wonder if you might ask a question about, does Unfair and Lovely have any complexity to it? How, and it seems like the answer is no, right? Because we don't see much drillability. We only see these images, right? Maybe the question is, how can this movement work towards bringing more complexity to the conversation? Maybe we can ask, because this pertains to drillability, this also pertains to, remember, the simple versus complex, that you do need a simple idea. That's something we learned from the IC, but you also need to have some complexity to really understand the issues. Maybe we need more articles about what is the historical what's the history of colorism in India? How does the discrimination actually happen? Do people get fired more often for being darker skinned? Do they get hired less often for being darker skinned? Drillability, complexity, maybe they need to, apparently also their engagement online has gotten smaller and smaller. It seems like they don't have very many followers. They're not getting very many likes on their posts. I wonder if maybe how to take advantage of sort of the social media scene and create some complexity and more information. Or maybe they need to partner with larger and more sort of more historical organizations. Maybe they should partner with, for example, Dark is Beautiful, because they seem to have a lot of work going on. They have advocacy workshops, galleries. Maybe they could include some kind of unfair and lovely initiatives as well. Um, Another thing that we talked about in the 30-minute video was how do we talk about our goals versus our process? So we remember that the Invisible Children goal was to capture Coney, and that their process was to use youth to bring awareness. And it was like, well, if your goal is literally to capture a warlord, how in the world are youth going to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe another thing that your paper could explore is maybe Unfair and Lovely needs to clarify their goals, because they say they want to start a conversation, right? Or they say they want to bring an end to this kind of discrimination. Well, maybe they need some smaller goals, and maybe you could help brainstorm some of those goals. And then if their process is using Instagram, well, what are some other ways they might use Instagram other than just posting pictures? Maybe they could use Instagram Live to show some of the workshops that Dark is Beautiful does, for example. Maybe they could use Instagram in conjunction with other things. Maybe they could have stories where they show examples of someone who is experiencing discrimination. So, what I'm seeing is that you have great articles, great information, and all you need to do is sort of pick between some of these questions and then start brainstorming your response to it and referring back to, again, these articles we're reading to kind of justify your answer to that. So if you are moving forward, what will you do next in your process? Or what are some of your thoughts about how you will move on now? What kinds of academic articles do you think you might need to look for? Or what is most interesting to you based off of what we've just talked about?
Yeah, so I really like the questions. That's actually having me like think about it more right now, and then maybe find like another scholarly article that'll just support what I'm saying, and then look deeper into like the websites, like the Dark is Beautiful. Just look deeper into that, and maybe the Black Lives Matter movement, how it inspired this one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess just look deeper and find another scholarly article, think about the questions.
Right. So what would the scholarly article, so what we've talked about really, I would say the main thing that we pulled out of this conversation, and really by looking at all of the things, is that currently Unfair and Lovely is, it lacks complexity, it lacks drillability, and it lacks actual engagement in social media, right? We can, and it also lacks a clear goal, and maybe the process is not matching the goals, whatever goal it may be. So you can, maybe in your paper, you compare Invisible Children to this organization, and then you make suggestions for how they can use social media and learn lessons from IC to improve. And that involves doing what you just said. Maybe taking ideas from Dark is Beautiful, maybe doing all the kinds of partnering or using the engagement that we talked about. As you are looking for a scholarly article, this is the hard part I think that a lot of people have. What kind of scholarly article would you look for if you are trying to do this project where you're comparing Invisible Children, or where you're making suggestions for how Unfair and Lovely should do something differently to create better outcomes. What kinds of scholarly articles would you look for?
Maybe like just generally, maybe like kind of the history of colorism, maybe the origin, about that first, and then see how that kind of compares and like how it kind of like after all these years, like how is it still here and it's like affecting? Because I know it affects like education, the labor market. There's like a link to poverty, so there's like a lot of different things.
Yeah, actually, I think that's great because we have our 2 scholarly articles about social media activism that you'll already be using. But one of the problems that you and I just noticed about Unfair and Lovely is that it doesn't have any history to it, right? It doesn't cite, there's no drillability. So you need to, and that I think affects their goals. They don't have a clear goal. I think that if you went back and found 1 or 2 articles, scholarly articles about colorism and how it affects people's lives right now, that you could brainstorm some good goals for Unfair and Lovely that goes along with how they can actually make problems better, right? How they can actually improve the current situation. So I think that's a great idea. And that would be perfect here. All right, you have your paper basically. You can say, here's what they're doing, here's why they're falling short, here's how they could improve, and I have some academic articles to support what I'm saying, right? But in the process of writing the paper, you use those popular sources. So you can take quotes from the NPR article. You can take quotes from the BBC article. You can do screenshots of the Instagram accounts, right? You can use all of these things, but also use the scholarly articles and actually answer a really important question, which is how do we make this movement that's got a lot of important stuff just a little bit more effective? So any kind of final questions or thoughts about, or, what you'll do to get started?
This actually gave me a lot to think about.
Great.
So I think I don't really have any questions as of now.
Great.
I'll probably email you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm going to do this awkward thing where I try to figure out how to end the video. All right.